Okay, I'm gonna use the whiteboard. Mhm. And whiteboard. Let's go class. Okay, so I am going to draw, because I know you can't see, I am going to draw the five elements. All right, at the top, we have good old fire. It's W, Fem, W, Fem. So we have earth, Fem. So we have metal, W, Fem, W. And then so we have water. And it doesn't look as symmetrical as I would like, so I might do that again. And then wood. I'm going to redo water just because it won't make a star if I don't. So we have water a little bit more over her. Okay. No, now I need to move metal because that's not quite the same either. Oh, we did the wrong one. Okay. Metal, you, okay. It won't let me take metal away, so I'm just going to go with it for now. That's fine. Okay. So I'm going to illustrate and kind of outline what we were talking about the other day. And I think it's really important, but for the most part, I don't know. Yeah, for the most part, I don't know how much of this I can talk about if a person doesn't have like a strong background in the fundamentals of Chinese medicine and like five element theory. Mm. But I think we can work with what we can work with. So I think the topic is really about, hmm, how do I put this? We could call it a motivational factor. Hmm. We could call it a courage factor. What else could we call it? Getting shit done, helping to maintain focus. One may even say confidence. Hmm. So help main focus. I'm gonna say improve focus. Let's just say improve focus. Even more. So that's kind of what we're looking to have happen. Um, but the number one thing, and I'll put it towards the top. I don't know if I want to use the word rapid, so I'm going to put rapid with an asterisk. Rapid, maybe more rapid would be appropriate. Let's do more rapid, and I'm going to put an asterisk because I need to think of something better than that. Hey, Ida, there was no one here, so I just went ahead and jumped to an advanced topic that Shayna and I, advanced topic, a topic that requires much more context.
Okay,
Uh,
do you want me to stay or?
Absolutely. You have all that
Okay,
context.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you have all the context. But what I was saying is instead of doing um, the traps of thinking, because that's kind of that's super review for Shayna and I, which is fine, but we didn't know if anybody would come, so we were just going to talk about. Okay, actually, that's exactly what I was about to say is what are we talking about? More rapid. Hopefully spell check can hook me up on this one because I think sometimes it's a common misspelled word in my universe. On. No, there's no spell check. Ida, can you help? I'll Google it. I want to make sure I get that one right.
Which
That's okay.
word?
Behavioral. Behavioral.
Behavioral.
Hmm.
BEHA. Oh, you might spell it differently. I was going to go you or, oh no, sorry, look it up.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, okay, I think that's it. Yeah, I was gonna put a U in it as well. Hmm. I don't know. I think that's, that's the old school thing. If you don't know a word, you're supposed to look it up, and then each time you look it up. That's actually one of my favorite ways of learning in Chinese medicine is when I get something wrong, or when my answers are incorrect, or I don't know, I can't arrive at an answer quickly. Go look it up. And typically, when you go and you look it up and you take the time to do that, it goes a little bit further into the mind and membrane change. So what we're looking for here is more rapid behavioral change. Okay, because we often talk about the accumulation principle. And the accumulation principle is a principle that shows that you can have small changes over long periods of time that accumulate to a great deal, right? And we also talk about the accumulation of momentum and that has effect. Well, there's another mm, precipice, I guess you could say, where you are starting to accumulate enough personal power that the behavioral change can become accelerated. So I think that long-term change over a longer period of time using consistency and the accumulation principle is a nut all of us have cracked a long time ago. Even that is a little bit violent if you think about it. Like, why are we cracking nuts? I guess to get inside them so you can eat. It's better than skinning cats. I really would prefer some sayings where I'm not like crushing and, killing and yeah. Anyway, so what Shayna and I were discussing the other day, and we were putting it into a functional grouping of the five elements, is how to accelerate or how to focus what will naturally be an acceleration of personal power and the ability for more rapid behavioral change. Because if we have long-term behavioral change over small bits, well, there must also be at least some element of more rapid behavioral change. But what we really want is a behavioral change that we're still not using force because force will use our own energy in the process. And I mean, that's a way, but I think that this one is a little bit more efficient in terms of less momentum lost in the process, less personal power used in the process, if that makes sense. And you could put long-term habits into the category of what I mean when I say more rapid behavioral change. Now, if there's a physical addiction, this is still going to be something that is could be monumental in helping to resolve or harmonize a physical addiction. You still might need some other stuff though, because it's physical. So you might need some stuff to help the body. Oh, hi Donna. All right, so yep, so that's kind of the topic. I was kind of showing I could talk a little bit more about what it feels like, what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, which is when you start to exercise a little bit of force, when you start to get into traps of thinking about behavioral change. But ultimately, this system, the entire system, if you think about the four directions of attention, the four directions of attention is intention and will. Okay, okay, this might be even more interesting because I can tie this into an earlier diagram because we haven't leveled up from the earlier diagram. It's still perfectly applicable. And so I'm going to make the triangle, and this was one of our favorite triangles for a little bit more of a topic that requires more contextual understanding. I don't like saying advanced topic, but um, you know, you have to have some foundation to know, to really put together, some of this. But we had our good old, before I do the triangle, I'll just do a little bit more binary and put intention and will. Oh, equation. Attention, will equal personal power. Personal power. So what's kind of cool about this is I'm taking something that is Don Juan, connecting it with something that is very, us, because I'm pretty sure that this triangle of intention and will, like it's knowledge, intelligence, and wisdom. I'm pretty sure that is our thing. That came about as a result of our group studies. And then how that can tie into five elements just as seamlessly. And that's fun. So we can start on one, we had knowledge. I might have to refer back to see what order they were in. I know Donna had this one written down. I just had spell check. Oh, knowledge, intelligence. I feel like intelligence would have gone on top. Yeah. Oh well. Wisdom. It's another part. It was another triangle. And I do know that there was at least one version, and I think we may have changed it, but there was at least one version that was intention, will, personal power in the context of the triangle as well. And I think we had another variation that was also kind of cool. I think I had another version where personal power was when all of them were, but remember, it's functional grouping. It's not any absolute whatever. Okay, so for the context of what Shayna and I were talking about, we were associating it to five elements of the four directions because we're talking about the four directions practice. So if we want to get to a point where this practice can help us to accelerate behavioral change, why? Because we want to. Like, I don't think anybody owes anybody an explanation if for some reason there's a behavioral change that they would like to more rapidly accelerate. Of course, like I said at the beginning, as long as intention and will are consistent, you will invoke the accumulation principle. And over a period of time, by doing this practice, you will look around you and every single thing will be exactly where you put it, especially if you're present, when you were putting it. You won't be like, oh, how'd that get? Does that make sense? Hey, Lisa, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so let's put this into a context that we've never talked about it before, which is five elements. I would go so far to say that hmm, I don't want to say vast majority. I can't say that because I didn't know who Mr. Beast was. So I'm just going to say, in my experience, a lot of folks have what I would call kidney and heart not communicating, but in an emotional and spiritual way. Not so much the physical, which will have physical symptoms, and then of course it's physical treatment, and it can get bad. Like what we call in Chinese medicine, heart and kidney not communicating is a serious illness in Western medicine. And it could be a variety of different ones, so I don't need to list them. So in a spiritual sense and in a emotional sense, which is two sides of the same coin in this particular system format, which is five elements. Water is associated with will, the power of your own will to do things. Um, Will and motivation, those are similar words, but I really like the word will when it's used in the context of survival, because I think that's a really good example. Obviously, that's not the only time that we're going to invoke our personal power and will, but that's a time when usually words in a person's experience cease and they kind of reach into something that they didn't know was there and they do something maybe that they didn't know that they were capable of doing. And um, it could be in an emergency situation, or it could be, as we're talking about it in this context, changing one's behavior. And again, if it's a physical addiction as opposed to a long-term momentous habit, and if it's starting to get to attachment, because we have attachments, habits, and addictions, and a myriad in between, right? That's not a rigid thing. That's a 2 degrees. Everything is 2 degrees, right? So we're going to associate water with the power of will. And fire, I'm going to I'm going to connect some dots with this that I haven't really heard. I do want to mention this, that this was never spoken to me by a professor so far, and this was never, I haven't specifically implicitly read this. But in Chinese medicine, we will associate each element with an emotion. And the motivational factor for anything that we do is how it makes us feel. And that can be emotional, and it can also, in a manner of speaking, it can be our response to experience, our internal response or interpretation of experience, which is also going to be chemical, but we may not, put it as an emotional response. It's an interpretation type of response, which is still cognitive, like it's cognitive, interacting with the body in a chemical way. But fire, I would like to associate with desire, because the impetus for every single thing that we do as a human being, and also every animal and everything else, is a fundamental desire. Again, this is a word that I'm using to describe our experience, and something that's happening in our shared experience. A Buddhist monk who goes to the mountain to be free of desire is doing that because he has a desire to, or they have a desire to do that for whatever reason. Maybe they think that they are going to break the cycle of reincarnation. Well, then they have a desire to break the cycle of reincarnation. Why would they want to break the cycle of reincarnation? Well, there's no suffering when you break the cycle of reincarnation. You are free from suffering, for good now, because you don't go back into the incarnate of the realm of suffering. Why would anybody want to be free of suffering? Because of how it feels to suffer and not suffer, right? So everything can be traced back to how we feel. Throw that in another context of law of attraction. And then we have Abraham Hicks, who has famously pointed out that it's not the car that you want, it's not the money that you want, it's not even the sexual partner, it's the feelings that you're going to get from that. It's the emotions you're going to get from that. So it's always going back to the feeling. So if fire is Shen and is associated with desire, no, it's not just, they don't associate with desire, but they associate it with emotion. All emotions affect the Shen. So yes, each element has an emotion, but all of them affect fire in the heart. And then of course, the heart wants what the heart wants, and it just go with your heart's desire. So we even talk about it this way. I'm not making this up. Or the feeling you think you will get from that. Absolutely. And that traces back to the desire, that traces back to the feeling, even if it's erroneous. Or even if it's a part of something that you are unaware of. You may not even be aware of the, in fact, I would say that a lot of people are not even aware of the mechanism behind the desire and the feeling of it. So I'm going out on a limb, and I'm going to associate fire with desire and water with the will. And I would say that in our society here in the United States, a lot of folks, not all, you know, have a little bit of trouble with getting shit done, behavioral change, you know. In what would I don't want to put anybody on blast, but let's say one day you found out that something that you did every single day was hurting somebody, and and you knew it. Like, let's, people love to debate, but let's just say for the sake of argument and this thought experiment that you know that the particular behavior that you are doing is hurting somebody. I am going to go out on a limb and say that everybody that is watching this is, because if you started watching this and you're still watching this, then I think that you would agree, you would want to change that behavior. The thing that you're doing that is causing harm, pain, and suffering to another person, and maybe you were unaware of it, maybe even it's kind of hard for you to change. I think that in some way we would want to do that. I don't think that that is an erroneous statement. You know, I think Shayna for sure, speak for Shayna. If Shayna learned tomorrow that there was a behavior that caused B reaction in C, I would do my best, right, to modify it as best I can, right, Donna? We're not, there's no image of perfection. We're not chasing anything, but gosh, I would really like to do my best to not do this behavior. And that's just one example that I'm pulling from the ether. Oh no, can I go back to the same whiteboard? I still think I go to new whiteboard and then use classic, and then it takes me back to the old one. So fine. So I think that many would agree that in our society, for many people, a more rapid change of behavior is difficult. It is a challenge. And the reason, according to at least this five element perspective, is because there is an imbalance. These five elements are imbalanced somewhere. Okay. So, what I have done, and the reason that I'm talking about this is because experientially it is working. It is working for me, and I can see it working for Shayna, even if she hasn't like fully thought about it this way. That's fine. People don't think about shit the way that I do all the time. I don't think about things the way that you do. We're different. But I have been specifically engaging it in this way, and it has been, and I've been doing it for a while now. And so far, there's no, I haven't had better results with anything else. And I see the results accumulating on the horizon. Like I can, it's like if it has been working this way, I have no reason to assume that it won't continue because it's still in principle. Of course, it's in principle. You know, this isn't a tangent. You guys know like astrology and when you put yourself in a category because you have certain characteristics. Like maybe you're a water element or a fire element, or you're a Capricorn in the setting of Sagittarius. I don't know. I made that up because I don't know. But you know what I'm talking about? It's like cosmology and stuff like that. Well, here's an interesting way of looking at things, or at least looking at it, is that oftentimes people will identify with a certain category because they have more characteristics that they identify in that category. Well, in Chinese medicine, or excuse me, in yin yang theory, we would view that as your imbalance. So someone is like, oh, I'm definitely this. I like to get angry really fast, or, I can get really irritated and I love the color blue. And, so they're like, oh, I fit with this category. I am, fire. I'm water. I would say I'm water element. Absolutely. There's these list of categorical things. Some are constitutional, some are just preference, like behavioral preference, um, a little bit of both. But I'm water element right now, at least, and have been for a long time. And I view that as an imbalance. I don't, I don't want, everything in one category. That limits me. I'm not as, so for example, I have trouble sometimes imagining myself going to a concert in my current life and like getting excited and jumping up and down and like bobbing my head for any more than like a minute and a half. Like I could maybe do it, but after like 90 seconds, I'm going to be like, can I just go ahead and sit down and just have a glass of room temperature water? And then I'll tap my foot or something as I'm sitting in my comfortable chair. Because otherwise I might start to do like Tai Chi movements and then I look like I'm shadow boxing an invisible enemy while other people are dancing. And that's just weird. Yeah, it does go with any label. Shy, trouble with change, etc. Yeah. What was I talking about? I think I did get off into a tangent because I was trying to imagine. Oh, I can't imagine that.
You
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
talking about horoscopes and
Yeah,
identifying with a certain
right.
prototype, archetype, whatever.
And the archetype kind of shows and indicates an imbalance because I sometimes have trouble getting excited for myself, sometimes getting excited for other people because I'm so water element. And that's okay. I just work with that. I just work on balancing my elements. That's a 365, 110 year type of deal, right? That's not ever going to change. So that's just kind of a tidbit, giving you kind of an example of what I mean by how that category, that archetype that we sometimes identify with, I don't think that it is commonly looked at as, oh, that's my imbalance. Like that's where all my shit is. And really, I would prefer it to be a little bit more mixed around where, sometimes I can get my energy up, but not too up because I can bring it back where it needs to be. And there's this nice harmony of degrees, right? Not equal proportions, but I'm more easily able to go back and forth without getting into any rapid extreme that causes maybe even the two to separate, which means I killed myself. I don't want to joke at that. Where's some wood? Okay, back to the whiteboard. So now how can we put this in the context of the four directions and how can you practice this? So this is so elegant in my mind. I'm sorry if it's not in yours, but I just love it so much. I know that I just rediscovered something and this isn't like Ernest is like, I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not Lao Tzu, but I did arrive at some of this on my own and then it's like, oh wow, that's so cool. So we're going to go with it's what's called the engendering and controlling. I'll write that down. Engendering means creating. Like that's what created it. That's what made it. It's often referred to as the mother and the child relationship, the creator and the created. I could say it that way, or it might not even be necessary. So we have engendering, and we have, and this, it's not my favorite word, but it's an old word, and it really describes a concept that is very contextual but controlling. It doesn't really mean what we think it means in this context. It's like when you look at a river, what keeps the river a river? The earth. The earth is creating a bank and it's underneath it, and then you have some atmosphere above it that keeps it in its river and it's controlling it. And then, but it's a relationship, right? Because the river is also slowly grinding away, long time, it is also bending the earth to its will. So they're working together. That's called harmony. Harmonizing is an activity. Balanced is a thing that our minds make up that doesn't exist. It's always balancing, harmonizing, relative balance. So engendering and controlling are the two things that we're going to work with here. So metal we can associate with uh, breath. In this context, I'm just going to say breath. That's fine. Earth, well, what are we doing? We're doing E Gong. We're doing the four directions. E. Let's just say this is quiet intention. And of course, I'm going to put attention because you can use those two words in this context interchangeably because you're doing the practice. So when you do the practice, intention and attention are not different. Okay. Does all this make sense so far? Because now I'm going to connect it.
As, as usual for me, the principles make sense, absolute sense, but the association with each one, with the element, doesn't stick in my brain. It doesn't,
Doesn't
it
have
just
to.
doesn't.
It's a functional grouping.
I
Functional
understand.
group, yeah. A functional grouping, you could put potato, and chicken noodle soup. It doesn't matter.
Then why use them? Why can't we
Because
just use
functional
bread
grouping helps you
will?
remember. Functional grouping is also a lens into the exact same way that ancients were thinking. You know, if I can put something into a functional group called the four directions of attention, a
Yeah,
hundred years from now, somebody might look at this and they'll be like, why is breath? What does he mean by cognition? And ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's just that I have grouped things together because in these groupings, you can do them simultaneously. And if you can do them simultaneously, then you are present times one, times two, times three, times four, which creates a new state of being that is ultimately going to make more rapid behavioral change more rapid and more easy and
I
something that
get,
you could
I get it.
communicate.
I
Mhm.
do it. I do.
But
I
you asked
get it.
why you asked why I
I just
use it.
why do I need the elements to
You
remember
don't.
it?
You don't.
Okay,
hmm But if I want to explain it to somebody else, don't you agree that this is one way that I can?
sure. There's a
Mhm.
million different ways to explain it. Yep.
Such as the star to the left and intention and will, personal power from Don Juan. So I even
Right.
gave three other examples of how we could talk about this if you wanted to. But I like
Okay.
Chinese medicine because it's elegant and I can trace it back thousands of years. And it is the observation of the world around us. It's in our language. The heart wants what the heart wants. You know, we do associate breath with lungs, with these different things. And when you look at metal, metal is often associated to like structure. The lungs are a structure that you fill. And so sometimes you could look at metal as like boundaries, understanding your boundaries. Boundaries aren't always keeping things out. It's how far do I want to go? This is my boundaries, not always so much. And it can still be, well, how much do I let you get into this little fence that I've created? So metal has all of these characteristics that just, when you put it with these other characteristics, elegantly describe the human experience in a way that you can work with it for better health. And that's the ultimate thing is like, why would you do anything? Because of how it feels. Like if I can use this functional grouping and other people can use this functional grouping and other people have been using this functional grouping for thousands of years to achieve better health, I'm going to find ways that I can apply this to a modern setting, which is exactly what we've done. But yeah, I can still talk about it in terms of the law of attraction. I can talk about it in terms of Toltec knowledge and Don Juan, or I could talk about it in T, and that would kind of be that star down there of knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence, which is really groovy, and I love talking about that. But let me explain. Maybe after I explain it, it will make even more sense because isn't being able to work with it and produce something more important than the philosophy behind it?
Absolutely.
Well, let me
In
show you that.
in your any of your explanations, it is easy for me. It's my brain, so it's easy for me to relate it back to nature. It's easy for me to see how it applies principles across more than just the human experience of all of nature. I just can't. I just the words of those elements don't. Can't pair them up in my brain in a way that makes me remember it easily. I struggle to remember which one goes which with
Well, it's not
which.
easy. Yeah, I never said that was the easiest way. I think maybe Don Juan's way might be the easiest way because he tried to keep things so simple, right? Intention, will, personal power. You want to do it, you actually do it, you get something. Like, so in
Yeah,
that
but
way, I could
like
appreciate it.
anything, all the words need an agreement of definition
Sure.
before you can utilize it and understand it and talk about it with each other. So I get it.
hmm
I get it. I just this doesn't stick in my brain. It's like slides
hmm
off like Teflon.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it takes repetition for
It
sure. Because
it
when
takes
you and I
Mhm.
talk about it, that's I have to I have to go back to your mnemonic, that W, Fem, W. And then
WFMW.
I have to remember like which organ it associates with, but it just takes practice.
And Donna just described the entire first year of me learning Chinese medicine. It just slid right off me because we're trying to translate concepts. So, for example, um, Ida. No, I don't want to put you on the spot. Are you okay being on the spot? That's rude. If you're not, I'll ask Shayna.
Okay,
Okay, what is blood?
I'm okay.
Okay, can you tell me what do you just in just a sentence? What would you say if somebody if a little kid's 3 years old and he says, Ida, what's blood? You know, what is blood?
Blood just flows through your blood flows through your veins
Mhm,
and contains many things that keep you alive.
mhm.
That's it.
Yeah, I think that's great. If I was a little kid, I'd be like, oh, okay.
And
And I'd
it's
probably
red.
have 700 follow-up questions because I'm earnest, but I think that you answered that perfect. Yeah, that's a good answer. And I really like that your answer is correct in that it is a lot of things. But a lot would have answered maybe red blood cells. They would maybe, I think marrow is another good example. The word marrow in anatomical sense in the West is just going to be inside of bones. And in Chinese medicine, it's this large concept like blood that has many things. Blood has so many different things in it that it can't be just one or two or three or viruses are a part of your blood right now. Like that's not what you want in there. That's a potentially pathogenic factor. But, aside from that, you have all of the different cells that are in your blood, not just red blood cells. There's many different cells. That's one of the primary ways outside of nerves that your body's going to be able to communicate with other parts of your body chemically is through the bloodstream. We know that. So the blood is many things. And so it's just one word though. It's just blood, and then you got the little color and it's red and it's blood. But so what I'm saying is that Chinese medicine is a lot like that. So we look at the word fire and we just think, that's this thing that we create with a spark. It needs three primary things. It needs heat, oxygen, and fuel. And that will create fire. Take anyone away and you don't have it. That's what it is. Well, in Chinese medicine, though, we're trying to translate concepts that are not directly translatable, like qi in English. So fire actually means a lot of stuff. And I do agree with Donna. It takes a lot of investigation. But the way that I'm explaining it, it shouldn't. Because you just need to think lungs and breath. That makes sense. Okay. So over here, I have the four directions of attention. And I'm going to tie that into the 5 elements, and I'm going to show you why that can equal more rapid behavioral change. And it just makes so much sense to me. So, number one, we have something that creates and something that controls in this theory, in this way of looking at the universe. So the one that creates is the one before it. So metal creates water, and that doesn't there are many minerals in water, and you can stretch the imagination to make it fit all you want to. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that it's associated with breath in the lungs and the corporeal soul, because that shit makes perfect sense. We're breathing it in and out, and it's our connection to the physical and the non-physical. Like that's the connection between those two things, between earth and water and all of these different things. But so the idea is that metal creates water, but it's the earth that controls the water. And we actually see that with riverbanks, with shores. So that makes sense. But the atmosphere also has something to do with it because the atmosphere, hydrostatic equilibrium, also helps keep water in where it's at. So it'll float out into space. Water itself, the ocean and rivers, is an example of hydrostatic equilibrium. So now that you don't need to really know that, that doesn't matter. But what you already know is that E means quiet attention and intention, and that this is the breath and that this is our power of will. So what I did is I applied that to the 4 directions of attention. With this formula, with what I've explained, Donna, if I want to create more willpower, what will I use based on the 4 directions of attention and what I circled that's associated to the metal?
Attention and breath.
Attention on your breath. And so that's a hypothesis for me at a certain point. When I learned this, I'm like, that's a hypothesis. It makes sense, but this is functional grouping, right? So it might not work for what I want it to. I don't know. But then I looked at Earth and I'm like, well, if I really want to direct, how do I direct my power of will? I create it with the breath, but how would I direct it? How would I move it? How would I, in air quotes in this context, how would I control my will? Donna, how do we control our will? If you don't mind us using the word control in this brief context. With our intention and attention. That's what we use to control the power of will. You can even put attention and intention on your lower dantian for your body awareness direction. So, in conclusion, what I have noticed with the 4 directions of attention is the more that I can get, the more that I can, A, maintain internal and external, B, really begin to elongate and maintain breath, well, then you'll be able to focus cognition, and that could look a lot like cultivating, and that's a whole nother topic. We know what cognition, we can do some really amazing things with the cognition direction if we have enough focus, enough space to do it in. And what creates that space? The first 3 directions being maintained. But the more that you can maintain the direction of breath, the more that you create space. And that space feels like a mind that is not trying to fight itself anymore. And when the mind isn't fighting itself anymore, and you've been intention and willing, because this isn't happening on accident, you start to gain the personal power where you look at a behavioral change and you drop it, just like Don Juan said. There's certain things they just start to drop. And again, we're not violating the traps of thinking. So we're not sitting around thinking about our problems and the things that we want to drop. No, that's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about doing the 4 directions of attention, and the more that you can maintain attention on your breath, and I said maintain, not just elongate. Now we're getting into maintain. So you are maintaining 3 directions of attention. The more that one can maintain 3 directions of attention, I think that is the intention and will necessary to begin to drop habits that you just don't want anymore. They're just not. Now, addictions and long-term attachments, there's going to be some physical stuff that you can maybe do to help accelerate that as well. But I have no reason to believe that if the accumulation of personal power doesn't continue for a person, that there is nothing that they can't choose. And it just so happened that it fits absolutely perfect with the 5 elements. And I could go into more detail about how it affects wood and fire and desire.
Is the water element is also associated with fear as well, right?
It is.
The
Yeah.
kidney. So if your intention and attention is on worrying and things that you might be fearful, that's what you're creating with your earth element. That's what controls the water, right?
That's what
So
controls the water.
so that, yeah, I just like how that all connects together.
Me too. And then, so for me, I have a little bit of trouble with fire, right? What do you think I use? What do you think I do to create that spark? I use the ethereal spirit. I use quality. I use, what's all that stuff that we love to talk about, Donna? The more that I can access that, the more my desires just become crystal clear to me. I don't really want this. I want this feeling because I'm really connecting to the feeling of the ethereal spirit and whom. And just imagine a world where their desires were led by the spirit, ethereal spirit, the hipster word for spirit. That's what we're talking about. Spirit. Let your spirit be your guide. I could find these quips in our language all day long. So if I really want to clarify my desire and make sure that the desire that I'm creating is understood by my intention, attention. Also, in some contexts, my ego is earth element E. I stoke the wood with sorry, that could sound inappropriate, but I create fire with the element of wood by accessing the ethereal spirit and which is associated with blood and liver and all that good stuff. But I got to be careful because if the fire starts to get a little bit too fiery, what do you use to put fires out? Water. What controls fire? Water. Mm, It just makes too much sense for me to ignore. And of course, water would be associated with the power of will. So you want to be able to balance the will and the desire. When you have balance between will and desire, I think what we would call that in law of attraction is conscious creation. I think what we would call that in Don Juan's world would be the life of a warrior, impeccability. How do we do it? The four directions of attention. Where is your internal? Where is your external? Where is your breath? And of course, detail would be necessary because a person needs to practice interacting with their breath without force, without trying to control it all the time, because you can do that sometimes, but it's very difficult to sustain attention on the breath if you're constantly trying to manipulate it. So that when we go back to that smooth breathing with the least amount of muscular tension, that really is the technique. That's the kicker. That makes the breath all day elongated more possible. So I am talking about being able to maintain a breath awareness for the vast majority of your day. Has anybody else had this experience where paying attention to your breath for the vast majority of the day just makes you feel more confident and strong and peaceful?
Yeah. To me, it's presence. It's being fully present in the moment and not pulled anywhere without my intention.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, breath is definitely one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the directions of attention, but an internal and external are necessary
Yes,
for me to be in the sphere of where I want to be all the time.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's why this is a little bit more of an accelerated topic because um, I it's that and that's why didn't you notice with warrior training I started with some teaching trying to help you guys with your breath. Help you with different breath techniques to make elongating and maintaining more attainable. And then, excuse me, more realistic. And then once the internal and external are kind of like, wow, I can't even imagine myself not being aware of my body or doing some sort of sensory perception technique, whether it's a sound technique or a tactile technique, that kind of being in between body and external, but still what you're looking at, all of the different senses that you can interact with and the different techniques that we have made up. My favorite is inclusive vision, keeping the sky in my perspective. Those are all still things that I do all day, every day, because I want to, because of how they make me feel and they're intentional and, they're in my toolbox and I adjust as I go, as I need to. I'm doing this practice just as I've recommended it. And there's always like this pull that Donna, I think, alluded to. But the more that my directions are intact, the less that pull can pull me without my desire being behind it. And that's when these five elements are more harmonious. My ethereal spirit, I'm being guided by spirit. Imagine desire being guided by spirit. And then when my desire is clear, my intention can be crystal clear. Imagine it almost like a person stepping outside of their door, being led by spirit. You know, they know their desire, their intention, and their attention is clear. What's the first thing they do before they step out? They take a deep, deliberate breath, and then they take the action step, which is will and water. Hmm. It's just too pretty. Like it just fits too well and helps me remember too well, and then I can apply it medically.